Chairman, let me commend you for this legislation. I think it provides clarity and guidance as to who should be in charge. And for a long time, we've talked about who's in charge of cybersecurity in the federal government. And for a long time, NSA was not coordinating with the Department of Homeland Security, and they are now. But when we talk about the issue of information sharing, which is critical to protecting these infrastructures, that's where I think this bill really comes into play. And Mr. Nojum, you talked about civilian control, and I agree with that assessment. There was a bill that was passed out of the Intelligence Committee that does not really specify which agency within the federal government should be in charge of this effort of information sharing. Some would argue that NSA, because of the pilot program, the Defense Industrial-Based Pilot Program, that NSA is the best agency to conduct that. I tend to disagree with that assessment because, as you mentioned, civilian control is important here. And in terms of international sharing of information, I don't think going to the intelligence community is going to be the right answer to this issue. So with that, I just want to throw that out to the panel. Who do you see as the best agency to be in charge of this critical component of information sharing? I personally think it should be DHS, and tell me why I'm right or maybe why I'm wrong in that assessment. Mr. Nojum, if you want to lead on.
I'll start. As I said a minute ago, civilian control will promote the transparency that is essential to building cooperation and trust with the private sector. And you got to have the private sector involved because they own and operate most of the critical infrastructure. But thinking for a minute through what the House Intelligence Committee did, one thing they did that seems like a good idea is to unlock the classified information, particularly the classified attack signatures that the NSA has for the benefit of industry. It's important to accomplish that in legislation. If that legislation stopped there with this flow of information from the intelligence agencies to private network operators who could then use it to protect their systems, we would support it. The problem with that bill is that it opens a flow back to the intelligence agencies and to Cyber Command and to other governmental agencies that are not specified at all of information from the private sector that could include regular user communications. It's important to limit that flow back, and I think that your bill, the bill that you're looking at, could do that with some very targeted amendments.
And Dr. Shannon and Ms. McGuire, what's your assessment in terms of who should be the lead agency?
I have to say no comment, thank you.
Okay.
We're a federally funded research and development laboratory.
Yeah, I understand. And Ms. McGuire, you may have the same response.
We believe that a civilian agency is the right and appropriate authority for this entity. As a global private company, it's very difficult for us to operate in a global playing field if we have this kind of interaction direct with some of the other agencies.
You know, for a long time we've had, the ISACs, the Information Sharing Analysis Centers, have been kind of the vehicle for information sharing in the past. I think this bill actually provides, again, that clarity that I think is needed. The ISACs have not been totally functional. They haven't worked as I think they were expected to work, and I think this is a good opportunity to really put something in place in legislation that can be a real vehicle for information sharing. Do you all agree with that assessment?
Well, I agree that the NISO as a concept and a framework can seek to accomplish that. I do have concerns about ensuring that those existing entities, such as the ISACs and the sector coordinating councils, that industry has put so much effort and resources into over the last 10 years, do not go by the wayside. I'm a firm believer that we have to improve those entities, and I think that the information sharing and the direct engagement with government has not always been, shall I say, as positive between the ISACs and the government agency of DHS, and I can I'd be happy to share some, specific examples with you after this hearing when there's more time.
How would you recommend merging, I see my time's about expired, how would you recommend merging the existing, the ISACs with this National Information Sharing Organization?
Well, I think that's something that we need to explore more in depth, because those ISACs, for the most part, are privately funded, privately incorporated, industry-owned and operated entities. And so I think we need to have that dialogue of how we would incorporate them into this framework.
That's, Dr. Shane, do you have any comments?
Just one comment is, again, going back to measures of expectations. When you stand up, whether it's the ISACs or any other entity over the last couple of decades, there were original intentions about what they should be able to achieve. Some of the things they were able to achieve and some things they were not for various reasons. So I think doing a critical assessment, at the current time of what those needs are would be helpful. I mean, that's part of what CERT and the SEI has been involved in assisting the government with the DIB evaluations that have gone in. It's excruciating, but I think in the end it was very valuable to policymakers.
Well, we look forward to your comments following up on how we can best merge these entities. And Mr. Chairman, my time's expired. Thank you.
Thank